Hey everyone, Natalie Stillwell here again. Thank you so much for watching this series, Forming the Future, your guide to raising children who pursue the good, true, and beautiful. Today I have Sam Guzman with me. He is on the marketing team for Covenant Eyes, and he's also a co-author of an ebook called Transformed by Beauty. He also has a blog. Sam, would you mind just telling everyone a little bit more about yourself and your blog and what all you've got going on?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a dad with three kids, happily married, a four-year-old boy, 3-year-old boy, and a little girl who actually turns 1 today. But I am the founder of the Catholic Gentleman blog. Look it up if you haven't heard of it. I think you'll enjoy it. And I, like you said, Natalie, I work on the marketing team at Covenant Eyes. That's my day job, and I have the privilege of working from home, so that's enjoyable. I get to see the family quite a bit more. So,
That's awesome.
but yeah, that's me.
That's great. What a great life. I love it. so one of the
Me
reasons
too.
I'm so good. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on today is because of your exploration in this topic of beauty, which obviously is a big factor in what I'm trying to accomplish with this series. And so, what is beauty? Why does it matter in our lives? And what is the purpose of beauty?
Well, sure. So, beauty. First of all, I think it's important to clarify that beauty. What is beauty? When we talk about beauty, what actually is it? It's not a thing it's not an idea that's out in space somewhere. What it actually is a reflection of God, and it's kind of like God's fingerprints all over creation. And anytime we say, "Wow, that's beautiful," what we're actually saying is, "Wow, that looks like God in some small way."
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about the importance of beauty, the chief importance of it is that it draws us towards the divine. It draws us up and out of ourselves and towards God. And because it's a reflection of God. And so when we see something beautiful, when we encounter something beautiful, we are in a way encountering God, whether or not we realize it. It may not always be conscious. In fact, many times it is unconscious. But when we have those wow moments, we are being drawn to our source and our destiny, which is God. And that's what we were made for. We were made to be in awe of God's beauty. And so when we have those encounters, it's an encounter with the divine, and what could be more important than that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a little unplanned question, but in the Catholic world, we talk about heaven being an experience of the Beatific vision. Do you know what that means? Do you have anything you could share with us about that idea?
Yeah, sure. So the Beatific vision really it's seeing God face to face as much as is possible for a creature to see God face to face. And the saints tell us that is our destiny is to encounter God, but even more so to share in his life. St. Peter talks about our destiny as being partakers of the divine nature. So it's almost like we're going to become little mirrors, gazing at God and then reflecting his glory back to him. And it's going to be this beautiful exchange where we're not going to be looking at God like we would look at the Grand Canyon, like it's something off in the distance, something that's beautiful but far away. No, it's going to be an intimate sharing in God's life, as far as is possible for a creature. And we're going to be gazing, but we're also going to be becoming what we gaze at, which is a really beautiful thought. Because we become like what we love. And so often we love the wrong things and we become like them. But when we gaze at God, we become God-like, become like God. And that's what we were made for, and the devil hates that. He wants to keep that beautiful transformation from happening at all costs. So he's always trying to trip us up with these false ideas of beauty, whether it's a celebrity scantily clad on a stage. He's like, hey, look at this is beautiful, become like this. But the end of that is death and destruction. And true beauty fills us with life, and transforms us into the image of Christ, the image of God.
Just to take what you mentioned now and run with it a little bit. When we encounter those false beauties, if you will, in society, or misguided or just askew, like how, as parents, like how can we kind of assess that and appreciate goods that may be there, but also like help our children to think through, what is good and beautiful in regards to their own body and how they should present themselves in public, or how people should be entertained and that sort of thing.
So I think with all these false, these counterfeit beauties out there, there's generally some element of truth in there, and that's why it's appealing. But it's a distortion. It's a caricature of the real thing. And I think as parents, we have to assess what value there is in a given work of art or a beautiful thing or whatever, whether it's a movie. There are some movies out there that are, the cinematography is just beautiful, and the acting is just superb. But if you look at the message that it's conveying, it could be very, very wrong. So as parents, we have to assess, okay, is there some value in this art that I can expose my kids to it and teach them to see the good in this? Or is it so dangerous that it's not even worth it? Even though there is some beautiful elements here, it's too dangerous for my kids. And especially when they're younger, it's important for us to be that filter. As they grow in age and discernment, we need to be guiding them. Okay, look, we can see that this is good in this. We need to draw the good out of that. But we also need to be able to understand what is a distortion of good. And we need to be practicing ourselves as adults, because I think a lot of times adults get kind of careless. They think, well, I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old, I don't need to be careful anymore. I can watch whatever I want or take in whatever I want. But that's not necessarily true. And I've kind of been surprised at some of the things that some of my friends watch and that kind of thing. Not that I'm judging their hearts or their motives, but just that, it's maybe that's something that is a counterfeit form of beauty. Yes, again, the acting is great, cinematography, but we need to be careful, because scientifically our brains change based on what we see, what we take in. It literally changes us on a deep level, and the more you expose yourself to things that are unholy or not pleasing to God, then it starts to change you at that fundamental level. So we just need to be careful. We need to be careful. We don't need to be prudish, but we also need to be very discerning, and understand that things have an effect.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it really does. And of course, there's a very popular show that comes to my mind that starts with the word game, ends with Thrones.
Yes.
And it's
yes.
very popular, and it's sort of a bummer because, some of my peers will say, what's the big deal? We're mature enough, but I can't stomach it. Like, there's a lot of elements that I'm like, wow, that's really amazing that they've made this show. It's really grand, but it's sort of like, you're eating a salad and then there's like a bug in it and you're like, okay, never mind. So that's what I was thinking of as you were talking, but
and that's what was in my mind as well. Yeah. I mean, what is it glorifying? What is it holding up as, and so often it's like things that are not
Yeah, I know.
Not beautiful.
Yeah,
So
and I do have some friends that are a little more honest about it, and they say, "Yeah, I mean, my mind does go down dark paths when I watch that, and I probably should stop." So, um, but with our children, we want to expose them to things that are beautiful. What kind of things do you have in mind for children to be exposed to on a regular basis, so they can start cultivating that taste for true beauty?
yeah, that's a great point because yeah, kids, I mean, they're never going to recognize false beauty unless they're thoroughly inoculated by true beauty. The more you see the real thing, the more you see the false counterfeits for what they really are. So I think first of all, um, you know, beautiful worship. Uh, at our at your parish or your church or whatever, but um, exposing them to beautiful worship of God. I mean, as Christians, we have a rich treasury, a rich heritage of beautiful music and um, uh, whether that's instrumental or singing or choral music or whatever, but it's all in honor and praise and worship to God. I mean, start there. If you don't do anything else, at least expose your kids to worship that reflects God's dignity, God's worth. Worthship. That's what the word worship comes from. It's declaring someone's worth, and when we're declaring God's worth, it should be as beautiful as it could possibly be. So show your kids beautiful worship. But then, when it comes to the secular world, I mean, I hate to divide the secular and the sacred. I mean, they're really, everything's sacred in a sense. But when it comes to things outside of the church experience, classical music is a big one. My little boys, they used to love watching videos of this classical musician Lang Lang play piano, just because it was beautiful music, and he was was a very entertaining performer. But they were really mesmerized by it. Like 3 and 4 years old, they're just captivated by this music, and we try to expose them to those kinds of things as much as possible. Obviously it has to be age appropriate, but I think you can start very early, and other things too, like plays. Movies aren't the only way to experience things. Plays are can be very entertaining, and they can be very enjoyable. But they also have a great element of talent involved and complexity with the different scenery, and then a ballet too. In the book Transformed by Beauty, we interview someone who's an amateur ballerina. She doesn't perform professionally, but she enjoys using her body in this beautiful way. And I think we need to expose our kids to these different art forms. I mean, it's easy to kind of fall to the level of just exposing them to pop music because it's kind of like cotton candy for your ears. But there's nothing wrong with that. I listen to pop music and stuff sometimes. But it has to be counterbalanced. And I think we especially need to strive to make our kids well-rounded, to appreciate all kinds of music. And understand that there are degrees of beauty and reflection of God's order. And so, yeah, music can be a big one that I would definitely try to expose your kids to different kinds of music and point out the beauty.
Yeah.
One last thing I was going to say was beauty is everywhere. Just pointing it out to our kids can go a long way. Like, for example, we had a beautiful sunset here the other day. And the sky was pink and orange, and I was like, hey kids, look at this beautiful sunset. And now every time they see a sunset, they're just like, Dad, look at the beautiful sunset. And it's the same with the birds and the trees. We have a bunch of cardinals and blue jays in our front yard. It's like, hey, look at those beautiful red and blue birds. And Now they'll sit on the couch and just look out the window and gaze at these birds because they're beautiful, and they love it. And so just little things like that, kids start to notice and appreciate. So it just kind of happens organically.
How important would you say getting outdoors and experiencing nature is in cultivating a love for what's beautiful?
Hugely important. I think one of the biggest tragedies of the modern world is how little exposure kids get to the natural world. If they're exposed to no other kind of beauty but nature, still, that is a powerful. I don't know if it's true, but I've always kind of thought it would be easier to be an atheist in a city when you're surrounded by all these creations of mankind, all skyscrapers and concrete, and we really know what we're doing and we've mastered. But when you're out by the ocean and you're just surrounded by this powerful thing that you can't control, and it's just beautiful and wild, and or in the woods, same kind of thing, you gain a lot of humility, and it teaches you to wonder. And I think that all theology and all philosophy, asking those deep questions of life, they all begin with an experience of wonder and awe. And you can't have that necessarily when you're surrounded by concrete. I grew up in the city. I love the city. There's nothing wrong with the city. But we all need to be intentional about seeking out that natural beauty. Many of the saints have told us that it's almost like another form of revelation. We have the Bible, but there's the nature can be a revelation of God. And his grandeur. And St. Paul tells us that by nature we can perceive God's nature and his power. Though we can't see God, we can perceive him through what he's created. So absolutely, it's important.
And we can reason that God must be beauty itself to make such
Right.
things. You also mentioned plays, going to ballet or something like that. And those are things where you're physically in person, seeing other people physically in person, as opposed to on a screen, watching a movie or, a fun YouTube dance. Like, what's the value of this sort of in-person encounter with beauty versus our interaction with beautiful things through technology? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. As far as the value, if there's more value in watching a video or actually being there in person, I personally love being there in person just because there's an energy there. Just seeing all these talented people pouring their hearts out on their instruments there's nothing like it. And I would say, you could compare it to any other thing that we do in person. People will spend a lot of money to go to a football game to watch it live. Sure, they could watch it on TV or, watch rerun on YouTube. But there's something about seeing that talent in action before your eyes live. What the deeper reason is there, why we appreciate that, I'm not really sure. I think there's just something real about it, something tangible that you can't quite get from a recording. But the other thing that your question brings to mind is the fact that there's nothing wrong with performing ourselves. In fact, I think we should all learn some skill. We should learn to create, not just consume. We live in kind of this consumeristic culture where we want to watch everybody else do everything. We want to just kind of sit there passively. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as human history, there's been performers. There's nothing wrong with that. But we need to create ourselves, and we don't have to be amazing at it. We don't have to be world-class musicians to learn how to play an instrument. Just play something. Someone, yeah, I can't remember the exact quote, so I won't even try. But someone once said something to the effect that, we all used to sit around, the campfire and sing songs to each other. And now we pay to watch other people sing songs to us. And it's like we've kind of lost that element of we're going to use our talents. Maybe music isn't your talent, but maybe painting is, or sewing or whatever. I mean, we all have different skills, but I think it's important to create and not just consume passively. We're being made in the image of God is being made in the image of a creator. And we can all reflect that to varying degrees.
So would you say that one way to bring beauty into your day-to-day life is to do things around the home that are beautiful, like you said, making music or finding some sort of artistic outlet? Do you guys do anything in your home at this point that helps to bring in just that day-to-day beauty, including through the creativity like you were mentioning?
Yeah, so I play an instrument. I actually play the Highland bagpipes. So that, I'm not world class or anything by any means, but I enjoy it, and so I try to practice and keep up with that. But also with the kids, uh, my wife is great about doing crafts. They regularly have time where they're painting, or they're making things out of paper. And a lot of times I'll get off work, like I said, I work from home, and I'll just, I'll go see what they're up to, and look, Dad, look what I made. And they're, maybe from an objective standpoint, it's not very beautiful, but they're exercising their creativity. And my little boy, my 4-year-old, is really into drawing lately. He for a long time he was asking me to draw me this, draw me that, and I finally said, you know what? I think you can do it. You try to draw what is in your head. And he was kind of like, I can't, I don't know how. And I said, well, you can. I believe you can do it. And then the other day he came in and brought me this really cool picture of a cowboy riding a horse. And I could see, you could see everything. You could see the horse's tail and the cowboy's hat, and he had a lasso in his hand and everything. And he'd done it all by himself. Nobody showed him how. And so he's kind of like on this art kick lately where he's just drawing things right and left. And I think the biggest thing we can do for our kids is just expose them to stuff, as many things as possible. We're going to go to the library and get some books on origami because they love to make paper airplanes and fold paper, and just exposing them to things. And their kids are naturally curious. They can get trained out of them, especially with like technology. If they figure out that they can just sit there passively all day and just watch TV, they'll do it. But naturally, kids are curious, and they love to create things and work with their hands and make something. And I think the more we can expose our kids to different forms of art, just see what they gravitate to. Maybe expose them to piano and violin, and that's not their thing. But boy, they love, the flute or whatever. But if you never expose it to them, you'll never know what they latch on to. So that's what we're trying to do, is just expose our kids to as many different creative outlets as possible, and see what they love.
And one thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to bring back up is like going to church and beautiful worship, but part of that is also oftentimes for those of us in the Catholic world, or if you travel very much and you like to visit other churches, like beautiful architecture even. And I know sometimes there's criticism from various sectors, even within Christianity, that it's not practical, it's too elaborate and expensive and distracting. What would you say to that sort of a commentary?
Well, I'll just show my bias, but I just have never understood the idea of we need to be poor and make ugly churches. Like, that just makes no sense to me. If you look at the Old Testament, when Solomon made the temple, I mean, he they poured all kinds of riches into making the most beautiful house for God that they could. And even in the tabernacle, before there was a temple in the Old Testament, they had like a tent for their worship. As the Israelites traveled through the desert, they had this tabernacle, and God gave them very specific instructions on how to make this tabernacle. And he even got, and as God was communicating this to the ancient Jews, he was very specific even about the vestments that the priest was to wear, what they should be. And guess what? They were all richly embroidered vestments with precious stones in them. And the tabernacle, like the Ark of the Covenant, was to be covered in gold and, richly, ornately carved and things like that. So throughout history, we've seen that it's an act of love. It's an act of love to give God our very best. And why would you make a beautiful city hall, with ornate, we go to state capitals. They're beautiful. They have, all these murals in the ceiling and their classical architecture. Why would you do that for the government and then give God, an ugly, cinder block building? It just makes no sense to me. So God should have our very best. And human beings, we're incapable of some incredible things. You look at some of these churches and they're just jaw-dropping. I mean, they're just incredible. And we have these abilities. We should give them to our Creator. And ultimately, in God's eyes, God is God. He's not always impressed with our finest. And yet, when my little boy brings me a drawing that he did, like we were just talking about, objectively speaking, is it incredible? No, but he made it for me, and it was an act of love, and I receive it with that same love, and there's a beautiful exchange that happens there. So, could the angels do better than we human beings? Of course, but that's not the point. We're giving God our best. We're putting forth our greatest effort. We're reflecting His beauty and His order and His design, His creativity in some small way in what we give back to Him. And these churches are monuments. I mean, nobody makes a pilgrimage to go see an ugly whitewashed building. They don't. But they'll go to Chartres Cathedral in France, or Notre Dame, and they'll be awe-inspired. I mean, there's plenty of stories of people walking into a beautiful church and just bursting into tears at the beauty of it all. And it can have a transformative effect. Yeah.
Beauty is
Sorry,
encounter with God. No, I was just what you said. Yeah. So, and I have heard it said, even if we melt down all the gold and, give it to the poor, it's only going to help so many people. Whereas when we have something that's truly beautiful and breathtaking and awe-inspiring, it's for everyone. Anybody can come, and there it creates a special place for them to encounter a God who is infinitely beautiful and mysterious and other and sacred, So, yeah.
What you said reminded me of something. Mary Magdalene, when she came to Jesus, she had this priceless perfume, and she smashed it and poured it all over Jesus' feet. In the Judas, who was the money keeper of the apostles, he was like, "What are you doing? That was so expensive. We could have sold it and given it to the poor people." And Jesus said, "Leave her alone. This was an act of love." And so our Lord even defends these sacrifices that maybe they're not practical, but love usually isn't very practical. When I was picking out an engagement ring for my wife, I didn't find the cheapest one possible because, we have to be practical, No, I got the nicest one I could afford. And I think any guy would do that. Like, that's the way we need to think about this in terms of love, not economics. Anyway, that's what
I like it. One question I had is, are there any things in society that we need to kind of be on guard about as far as things that might kill that love and appreciation of beauty in our children or even in ourselves?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, that consumeristic mindset, it creeps in everywhere. Okay, it's not just shopping per se. It's this idea that all I do is take. I never create. I never give. And that can be even something like cooking. Think about cooking. Like, um, I am only going to go out to eat ever. I'm never going to make anything in my own home. Like, that's a very dangerous mentality to get into, in the sense that you lose a part of your humanity when you do that. And I remember my kids love this movie Wall-E, about the little robot. And in the movie, all the human beings, they just sit in these chairs mindlessly consuming whatever the thing is at the moment that happens to be popular. So the guy on the loudspeaker says, "Today's color is red," and they press a button, and all their clothes change to red. And they say, "I want a Slurpee shake," and it pops up in front of them, and they drink their shake. And they have a TV right in front of them. They never have to move. They never have to create anything or do anything or interact with anyone else. And are they very human? No, they're barely human at all. They're like just mindless blobs. And a lot of the movie centers around how they recover their humanity. And it's kind of the same for us. We can, to a lesser degree, fall into this trap of, I'm just going to consume information, entertainment, food, clothes, and we lose that image of God, that creativity, that creative love starts to disappear. Saint Maximilian Kolbe, one of my favorite saints, says, love alone creates. And the less we have, we when you're making something with your own hands, you put some love into it. You want to make it beautiful. And we can easily lose that by becoming mindless consumers. The other thing I would say too is kind of along the same lines, but this idea of exposing yourself or your kids to the cheap entertainment that takes no energy to appreciate, if you know what I mean. Like, sinking to the lowest common denominator. Well, we're only going to listen to Britney Spears or Lady Gaga or whatever. That's all we're ever going to listen to in our house, because it's makes my ears happy in the moment. Classical music, boy, it takes a little bit of work to appreciate. I don't want to deal with that. That's the fast track to losing your appreciation for beauty. And that could go for anything, books too. A lot of the, books, people are just so excited that kids read now that they don't really care about what they read. And it's like, maybe you should, Goosebumps is not on the same level, as some of the classics. And you look at what people, well, that's not age appropriate for my kids. I mean, my kids can't understand, some of these classic works of literature. That's not true. You look at the stuff that kids were learning in the late 1880s in public schools. I mean, they were studying Shakespeare in like 8th grade and stuff, and now we're dumbing things down for kids to such a degree that it takes no mental effort for them, but they're also not growing in their capacity to appreciate the beauty of some of these works of literature. So it kind of applies across the board, whether it's music or literature. Or film even. We can sink to the lowest common denominator, just do what's easy and pleasurable in the moment, or we can put forth a little bit of effort and cultivate an appreciation for some of these things. I took a class in college of classical music, and I already liked classical music. I grew up in a home where there was beautiful music being played. And so I already had an appreciation for it, but I took this class, it was like an intro to music theory or something like that. And when you really start to understand the complexity, the artistry that went into some of these pieces, I mean, it just blows your mind. And you listen to it with a whole new ear. But yeah, it takes a little bit of work. It's not easy music, but it's this pinnacle of human achievement in a way. And so we need to put forth the effort, and expose ourselves and our kids to it. I know I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry.
No. What? Go ahead if you have more.
Well, I was just going to say that as parents, it starts with us. What we appreciate, what we love, what we listen to is what our kids will. You can't put on classical music for your kids and hate it yourself. It's not going to work. So I guess square one would be cultivating an appreciation yourself for some of these finer things, and learning to see them for what they are. And then you can instill that same love in your kids. But otherwise, it's just going to come off as false.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds me of that analogy of, you're not going to really be able to appreciate the full beauty of God or of heaven even if you haven't cultivated little virtues along the way. And so it being similar to appreciating how music is composed and different instruments and how they're made and what they sound like and how hard it is to play them and all that. Because the more you know, the more you show up at the opera and your mind is blown. Whereas if you've never been exposed, it's like, wow, this is really powerful, but you might even be missing out on deeper levels of beauty. That just came to my mind when you were talking. Maybe it applies more broadly to the pursuit of the good, true, and beautiful than just talking what we are today on the beauty aspect. But before we wrap up, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how can we encounter beauty in one another, in our in-person, face-to-face encounters, in our family, modeling our interactions with other people for our children. Is there a special kind of a beauty that we encounter in others?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to have those in-person encounters. Be intentional about it. It kind of breaks my heart when you look around at the wider culture that people don't even eat dinner together anymore. They don't talk to each other. Maybe they all live in the same house, but they disperse and go to their own rooms and turn on the TV or go down the computer, and they don't even have these interactions. And it's safer in a sense, in this, that we'll never get hurt and we'll never have to sacrifice any time or energy. And yet how sad that we no longer know each other. And yeah, I think we have to be intentional about those encounters with your kids, with your spouse, but then outside of your own family with others. Invite people over to your home for dinner. Accept invitations to go to other people's houses, that kind of thing, where you get to know go talk to your neighbors. When's the last time you talked to your neighbors? We're privileged where we live to have some very friendly neighbors who'll talk your ear off. But in a lot of places I've lived, that's not the case. People just keep to themselves. They never talk to each other. So get to know your neighbors. But yeah, when we encounter another person, there's always something beautiful to be found in their personality, whether it's a little interest that they have that you never thought something you never thought of, or a story that they have to tell. A lot of times elderly people get forgotten these days. When we first got married for about 6 months, we were going to a nursing home together as a couple until we our baby came along. We got pregnant, and we had to kind of cut that short. But these people were starving for affection, and they had so many interesting stories to tell of their life. And grandparents too, same thing. They often get neglected or forgotten about. But each person has the personality is a treasure. What makes them unique? Find that out, and it'll probably be beautiful when you find it out. Um, and the other thing I would say is that little acts of love are beautiful. Um, Many times throughout the day, there's interruptions. There's little sacrifices that you make for your kids, for your spouse, whatever the case might be. But that effort, that sacrifice, even if it's small, like it feels insignificant in the scheme of things. That's a beautiful, life-giving thing to show your family that love. Again, like I said, I work from home. Sometimes the kids bang on the door and they want in my office, and it's not necessarily a good time. I'm in the middle of a project or something, but then they come in. They say, "Daddy, I want a hug," or "I just wanted to show you what I made," or whatever. And there's a beautiful moment of connection there between my kids and myself, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Never brush your kids off. I know they can be annoying. Sometimes they can be stressful and tiring, but never brush them off, because the only thing that really matters in life is people. Other human souls, they'll live forever in one way or another. They'll live forever. You can take love with you. You can't take anything else. And cultivating those encounters, even if they require something of you, you'll get so much more in return that what you give is insignificant. So don't be afraid of people. I guess that would be the message that I would leave people with, is just don't be afraid of your neighbor. Don't be afraid of your spouse, in the sense of, "Oh, well, she's talking my ear off. I just got home from a long day. I'm tired from work. My wife wants to talk to me and tell me all about her day." Don't brush that off. Don't brush that off. That's an opportunity for love there. And like I said, you'll get so much more in return than you'll ever give, that you'll think nothing of it. But it takes that intentionality, and that sacrifice, and that choice to love, even if it costs you something. But that's what Christianity is all about. It's about the cross. Oftentimes the crosses are very small, but it's in carrying those crosses that we become like Jesus Christ. So.
And it does sound like you're also saying our actions can be beautiful, that they can make us more beautiful. They can share, beauty with another person and give them a glimpse of God through our choices. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. What is God like? What if the person on the street that you just passed by, with a sign in his hand saying, "I'm hungry," or whatever. What if he never encounters God in any other person but you? What will he remember that God was like? Maybe he won't think in terms of God, but this person treated me differently. He treated me with respect. He asked me my name. He wanted to know me. He didn't just throw some coins in my cup and move on. And I think many times the only God that people will ever encounter is us. And we need to show them what God is like. And what do we know? God is love. And like that quote I said earlier from Maximilian Kolbe, love alone creates. It's a creative thing to love other people. It gives life. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is beauty and creativity. Love produces that. Love is the source of those things. Yeah, go ahead.
Which naturally brings us to the idea of men and women being designed to create life within the context of marriage, ideally. But that is...
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's that life-giving love is at the heart of creation. It's at the heart of the Trinity, and as human beings made in the image of this creative God, we have the privilege of mirroring that life-giving love, where we give ourselves to each other, and guess what? It brings forth life. Um, like that's at the heart of reality, and that's why when you look at the history, I specifically refer to the Catholic Church, but when you look at the history of the Church, defending the family has always been at the forefront. Why? What's the big deal? Who cares about these things? I mean, the world doesn't care about them. Why should we? Because it strikes at the heart of reality. Like the love of the Trinity is the model for the love of the family. And if you strike at the family, you're striking at that image of the Trinity. And you can't do that without devastating consequences. And we look at we're celebrating, not celebrating, mourning is more like it. The anniversary of Roe versus Wade coming up here, and 50 some million lives lost, 60 million lives lost. The number just keeps growing. But what is that? Wasn't that culture of death? Is the loss of that Trinitarian love of the family has been destroyed. And where love gives life, the lack of love gives death. And so, you can't strike at that beautiful picture without tremendously tragic consequences. And that's exactly what we've seen in our society. Where there should be life, there's death. But we know that we serve a God of life and a God of love. God is love, and God is life.
So I feel like we've come full circle as far as this idea that, oh gosh, I'm losing my train of thought already. Where was I going? Bummer. The Trinity and beauty, encountering God. Ah, yes. The culture of death and this idea of the false, skewed beauties that are offered to us. So this idea of like, it's a good thing and it's beautiful to be able to have this license to do whatever you want and, use your sexuality however you want, that sort of thing. And it's a message our children are going to be bombarded with. It's sort of a false promise. There's a false beauty there. It's sexy, but it's not like the fullness of love. And so as we were just discussing, ultimately it kind of breaks down love and beauty and life and those beautiful sacrificial acts that make our life beautiful and fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected. That's the thing. Like the more you dwell on these things and contemplate these things, the more you see how there's no such thing as a true thing that's not connected to another true thing. They're all part of this beautiful fabric of order. And God's laws are not arbitrary. God doesn't just say, you know what, I'm going to make marriage to make you miserable. Like I'm just going to say you can only have one wife. Well, I want to be with like 20 women or something. No, you can only be with one. Oh man, God, you're so mean. Like no. God has a plan, and his laws reflect reality, not some arbitrary decision he's up there making. He's just picking rules out of the sky. No, they're based on what is best for us, the way we were designed, the way we can most fully experience life and joy and beauty. So when we follow God's laws, we flourish. We're made to. We become what we were made for. We ultimately become more human. So, yeah. If anybody knows, the other thing too is we have to have silence to reflect on these things. Our culture is so noisy, just constant. I was at the gas pump the other day, and there's a stupid TV on the gas pump,
Right.
playing ads and news in my face. I'm like, I can't even pump gas in peace anymore. Like, what is the world coming to?
Yeah.
And we have zero moments that aren't filled with something anymore. It seems like. How can you ever reflect on these deeper questions of what were we made for? Where are we going? Why are we here? Why are things the way they are? And we can't reflect on beautiful things. We can't reflect on beautiful. We don't even notice the sunset anymore because we're too busy gazing at our phone. That's the kind of thing that kind of deadens our soul to a degree, where we no longer perceive the beauty that's all around us. We're kind of like swimming in this sea of beauty, but we just lose. We don't even know that it's there anymore because we're just too busy filling our minds with what amounts to junk. So it takes some effort. It takes effort, but virtue always takes effort.
Thank you so much for all your reflections. I feel like we just all need to be praying that God will help us to open our eyes to the beauty around us and stop all the noise and take it in and share it with our families and ultimately share it with the world, just one person at a time. And you give us a lot of practical tips and things to be on the lookout for. So I'm really grateful for our time. And I want to know, how can we all keep in touch with you and check out what you've been up to lately?
Sure. Well, first place, I guess, would be to go to covenanteyes.com and look up our blog. There's tons and tons of resources that can help you and your kids kind of navigate this complicated online digital world that we live in, make wise choices. So covenanteyes.com. You can look us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're everywhere. And then the Catholic Gentleman, my blog. I write about a lot of the things that we talked about today. So you can look up my blog at catholicgentleman.net. That's catholicgentleman.net. And it's regulated up to, you can also follow on Facebook or Instagram or all those cool places and keep up to date. So covenanteyes.com, catholicgentleman.net. That's how you can keep up with what I'm up to. So
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm going to let you get back to your day, but it's been wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. Bye-bye.